I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. I hope you're enjoying the new shorter intro, those people who complained about how long the last one was. Today's question of the day, I've gone to the viewer mailbag and I've had this email from Keith. Hi, first time emailing, multiple times hassling with YouTube comments. Well, Keith, it's great to have you here in my email inbox now as well. Firstly, I love the show and really enjoy the daily views. Keith, you're on the right track here. You know how to butter me up and get what you want by starting with a bit of flattery. Flattery will get you everywhere. The first question I have, and he's asked two questions, we're only going to focus on one today, is about a week late in regards to a YouTuber from Unsleeved Media getting assaulted for his views by a far left shop owner. The question I sent, or I want you to explore, is it wrong? Is this just the start of the decline into the sort of far left attempt to promote violence by saying that it's okay to punch a Nazi, even if that said person is not actually a Nazi, but just a Trump supporter? Well, Keith, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure about that particular incident you're referring to. The one incident that I do know of that happened recently was Jeremy Hambley from The Quartering, the YouTuber Jeremy, who was allegedly physically assaulted at a comic convention by someone who walked up to him, asked what his name was, and then just laid into him with a barrage of punches and was screaming obscenities about how he was going to kill him. And Jeremy basically had to retreat, and other people had to intervene to protect Jeremy in that situation. And apparently the alleged attacker has been posted photos of himself on social media wearing the Punch a Nazi t-shirt. This is this idea, this new ideology, this Punch a Nazi ideology, which is now gaining a lot of popularity in some quarters. This is a movement that we should be fearful of. In fact, I would argue that we should be just as fearful of the Punch a Nazi movement as we should be of the Nazi movement itself. Both of them are very dangerous and anti-social ideologies. And I don't just mean anti-social in a sort of, that person is not enjoyable to socialise with, but I mean this is anti to a good, healthy, functioning society and to societal stability. Basically, this is a very, very dangerous threat to our stability as a society, and it's a very, very dangerous threat to natural justice. To have people who are wandering around arbitrarily acting as judge, jury, and executioner and then carrying out acts of physical violence on other people is a very, very dangerous thing. The moment that happens, your society has broken down. You no longer have stable society if everyone's going to wander around and do that sort of thing. Secondly, it's a violation of natural justice, because natural justice basically would suggest to us that you've actually got to verify that a person is guilty of something before you take punitive action against them. So before you punish someone in any way, you've got to ensure that they are actually guilty of what you are claiming they're guilty of. And clearly with people just wandering around punching people that they think fit a particular category, there's no natural justice in that at all. And lastly, obviously, there's a clear ethical violation here, because the basic principle of self-defense is this, and this because people who are supporting the Punch a Nazi idea are claiming that this is a form of self-defense. They are defending society against this dangerous evil threat. Well, self-defense, the reason you can use physical force in self-defense is because of the whole point that you have an immediate threat to the well-being of another person. You have an unjust aggressor who has come into our midst and has caused and is causing an immediate threat to the well-being of another person. Like they are actually doing something that is physically harmful. They are carrying out an act of unjust aggression. They don't just hold ideas that you find disagreeable or ugly, but they are actually doing brutalization to another person. And you have to step in and use force to stop that from happening, because A, the threat is immediate, it's actually right there in front of you, and B, there's no other way of resolving that issue. And so therefore the principle of double effect kicks in, and you are able to use physical force because your intent here is not to do harm to another person. Your intent is to protect an innocent person or to protect yourself from unjust aggression. And so therefore the use of physical force is not an unethical thing to do in that situation. The unintended secondary effect might be the harm that is caused to the unjust aggressor as you physically defend yourself or another person. So it's not even, it doesn't even meet the basic ethical criteria for how self-defense is supposed to work. And I guess really most troubling of all about this is the grand irony here that basically in the name of stopping fascism, you have adopted the very tactics of fascism, because this is exactly what Nazis did. They organised brown shirts who would go around and do acts of physical violence to people and to their places of work and their homes in order to intimidate them into silence and to begin to dominate society. And you are doing exactly that. You are enacting fascism. You are enacting the tactics of Nazism in order to supposedly stop Nazism. Now, in response to this, people have said, yeah, the reason I'm not on board with the punch a Nazi thing is because I subscribe to the non-aggression principle. And that's a good thing. The non-aggression principle is basically something that's part of the sort of libertarian way of looking at the world. And effectively what it says is that you should never use physical force as a way of trying to get your way. You should never use physical force on another person unless there is a legitimate act of self-defense involved. So there is an immediate physical threat to you and there's no other way of resolving it, and therefore you have to use physical force in that situation, which is obviously different from pacifism, where pacifism, people often think non-aggression and pacifism are the same thing. They're not. Pacifism is like you don't use physical force ever, full stop, period. Now, the non-aggression principle allows for the use of physical force as a form of self-defense, but you would never ever use it to try and dominate another person, or because they disagree with your ideas, or because you are trying to force them to accept your ideas. Now, my preference is the Christian formulation. It's much older than the libertarian non-aggression principle, and the non-aggression principle is co-opted from Christianity. But I think the Christian formula, because of the fact that it takes it one step further, I think is actually better. Again, the Christian formula is not just love your neighbour as yourself, but love your enemies and do good to those people who hate you. And the reason I like that formula, despite the fact that it's even harder, is because of the fact that actually it helps us to flourish. It's not just good for society, but it's good for us as individuals when we don't hold hatred and animosity and grudges and bitterness in our own heart and mind towards other people. It's really good for our flourishing. When we hold those things inside us, we actually end up being held back. We end up being diminished as well, despite the fact that it takes a lot of difficult virtue to love people even when they hate you, to show basic kindness or respect to people even when they might be disrespecting you. But to do that, I think, is a profoundly good thing for us. As the old saying goes, holding bitterness and anger and grudges inside your heart is like drinking poison and hoping that other person that you are bitter towards will die. That's not how that works. It's you that diminishes and fails here. Now, the big point here, though, is this. The people who are running around promoting this idea of punch a Nazi, and this is a good thing, I would say, what the heck do you think you're actually doing? Because basically, you no longer have the high moral ground. The moment that you are claiming to be in a position of moral superiority while at the same time using brutal physical force arbitrarily on people because of the ideas that they hold, you don't hold the high moral ground at all. What are you actually defending here? Because if you're claiming to defend a safe, stable, tolerant social order, and you are defending it by running around acting in a way where you use physical violence arbitrarily on people because of the ideas that they hold, then you are not defending a safe, stable, peaceful, tolerant civil order. Instead, what you are defending here is basically a form of Darwinian survival of the fittest, might makes right. The strong will dominate the weak. Ironically, again, this is exactly the heart of Nazism, the idea, this will to power. The strong will overcome the weak. We will eradicate weakness from our society and create a purer and better society by doing that. What are you actually defending? Now, if people are going to say to me, well, it's all about what I stand for, I would say it's not just about what you stand for and what you stand against. It's also about how you stand for those things. So if you claim to stand for a tolerant, peaceful society, but the way you stand for that and stand against the opposite is by carrying out arbitrary acts of brutal violence, then I would say I don't believe you. Because your actions tell me a lot more about what you stand for than what your words do. And what you claim to stand for is going to be proved true or false by the way in which you stand for that thing. So if you are carrying out arbitrary acts of brutal violence against people simply because of the fact that they express ugly ideas, then you don't stand for a peaceful and stable civil order at all. Like I said, you stand for a society that I don't want to live in. You stand for a society of brute force where someone sets the agenda or a group of people set the agenda, and anyone who thinks or speaks outside of that agenda, it is perfectly okay to do acts of physical violence against them arbitrarily. It's okay to use brute force in order to dominate another person and to force them into submission, into your way of thinking, or to remaining silent. And I'm sorry, but that is simply not a just, stable, civil order. It is not a just, stable society, and it's certainly not the kind of place that I want to be living in or I want my kids to grow up in either. So yes, we should be fearful of Nazism, but we should also be equally fearful of people who are promoting the punch-a-Nazi ideology, because what they are promoting has a lot of similarities, and it's also extremely dangerous for our society and will fracture us and will destroy society and will lead to just the same sort of violence and brutality being carried out on other people, and in a way that's totally arbitrary too, and that just isn't acceptable. If we claim to want to live in a peaceful society, that just isn't acceptable. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below, and if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.